I was grading papers when Principal Hendricks walked into my classroom with a lawyer I'd never seen before. The afternoon sun streamed through my windows, casting shadows across student projects that covered every wall of my fifth-grade classroom. "Mr. Davidson, we need to discuss a serious allegation that's been filed against you," Hendricks said, setting a thick folder on my desk. "You're being accused of verbal abuse and discrimination against a student." After 12 years teaching elementary school, I thought I'd heard every complaint that could be made about a teacher. Late homework policies, difficult test questions, even my insistence that students show their work in math class. But verbal abuse? I'd never even raised my voice at a student. "Which student?" I asked, my mind racing through my class of 28 fifth graders, trying to imagine what could have prompted such a serious accusation. "Timothy Chen," the lawyer replied, opening the folder to reveal legal documents that made my stomach drop. "His parents claim you've been systematically targeting him with inappropriate comments about his academic abilities." Timothy Chen, one of my brightest, most curious students, a kid who asked thoughtful questions, helped struggling classmates, and lit up whenever we started a new science unit. I'd been praising his work all year, encouraging him to challenge himself, telling him how smart he was. Apparently, that was the problem. "The parents allege that your repeated comments about Timothy's intelligence constitute verbal abuse and create a hostile learning environment," the lawyer continued. "They're seeking damages for emotional distress and requesting your immediate removal from the classroom." What I didn't know was that Timothy's parents had been recording our conversations for months, documenting every time I called their son brilliant, gifted, or exceptionally bright. What started as a teacher encouraging a talented student had somehow become evidence in a lawsuit that would destroy my career and change everything I thought I knew about education. Because sometimes telling a student they're smart is the most dangerous thing you can do. Let me explain how complimenting a child became a federal case that would cost the school district $200,000 and end my teaching career forever. I'm James Davidson, and I've been teaching fifth grade at Maplewood Elementary since 2012. I'd always dreamed of being a teacher, even as a kid growing up in small-town Ohio. There's something magical about that moment when a concept clicks for a student, when their face lights up with understanding, when they realize they're capable of more than they thought possible. Maplewood Elementary serves about 600 students in grades K-5 in suburban Portland, Oregon. It's the kind of school where parents are highly involved, academic expectations are high, and teachers are expected to individualize instruction for students with vastly different ability levels and learning needs. My classroom was on the second floor, overlooking the playground where kids spent recess running, playing, and burning off energy before returning to afternoon lessons. The walls were covered with student work, science fair projects, and motivational posters encouraging kids to dream big and work hard. I'd always prided myself on recognizing each student's strengths and helping them develop confidence in their abilities. Some kids excelled at math, others were natural writers, and some had artistic talents that amazed me daily. My job wasn't just to teach curriculum, it was to help each child discover what they were good at and encourage them to pursue their interests. Timothy Chen had been in my class since September, and from the first day, it was clear he was intellectually gifted. While other students struggled with basic multiplication, Timothy was already understanding concepts I typically didn't introduce until later in the year. He read books several grade levels above his peers, asked questions that showed sophisticated thinking, and helped explain difficult concepts to classmates who were confused. But Timothy wasn't just academically advanced. He was kind, patient, and genuinely excited about learning. He never made other students feel bad about being slower to understand, and he often volunteered to help during group work. He was exactly the kind of student teachers dream about having in their classroom. So I did what any good teacher would do. I encouraged him. I told him he was smart. I praised his insights during class discussions. I recommended advanced books for him to read. I suggested he consider entering the science fair. I called him brilliant when he solved a particularly challenging problem. I thought I was being a good teacher. I thought I was building his confidence and encouraging his love of learning. I was wrong. The first sign of trouble came in November during parent-teacher conferences. Timothy's parents, Dr. Sarah Chen and attorney Michael Chen, scheduled a meeting to discuss their son's progress. I was excited to share how well Timothy was doing and to discuss ways we could continue challenging him academically. Timothy is one of my most gifted students, I began, pulling out samples of his work to show them. His writing is sophisticated, his math skills are well above grade level, and his scientific thinking is really impressive for a fifth grader. But instead of the proud smiles I expected, Dr. Chen frowned and exchanged a look with her husband that I couldn't interpret. "We need to discuss your classroom management approach," Dr. Chen said, her voice taking on a formal tone that made me uncomfortable. "Timothy has been coming home with some concerning reports about how he's being treated differently from other students." "Differently how?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I try to challenge all my students appropriately for their ability levels." "He says you constantly single him out in front of the class, calling him smart and brilliant in ways that make other students feel bad about themselves," Attorney Chen explained. "This kind of favoritism creates an unhealthy classroom dynamic." I was stunned. "I praise all my students when they do good work. Timothy happens to do exceptional work consistently, so yes, I acknowledge that. I thought you'd want your son's achievements to be recognized." "What we want," Dr. Chen said, "is for our son to be treated like every other student in the class. No special attention, no singling out, no comments about his intelligence that could make him a target for resentment from peers." "But Timothy is clearly gifted," I protested. "Shouldn't we acknowledge that and provide appropriate challenges for him?" "That's exactly the kind of thinking that creates problems," Attorney Chen replied. "You're labeling our son based on your subjective assessment of his abilities, and that labeling affects how other students see him and how he sees himself." The meeting ended with them requesting that I stop making any comments about Timothy's intelligence or academic performance beyond basic feedback like "good job" or "well done." No more calling him smart, brilliant, or gifted. No more suggesting advanced materials. No more acknowledging that his work was exceptional. I left that conference feeling confused and frustrated. In 12 years of teaching, I'd never had parents complain about me praising their child too much. Usually, parents wanted more recognition for their kids, not less. But I tried to follow their wishes. For the next few weeks, I monitored my interactions with Timothy carefully. When he solved a difficult problem, I said good work instead of brilliant thinking. When he wrote an exceptional essay, I commented on his effort rather than his talent. When he asked insightful questions, I thanked him for participating instead of praising his intellectual curiosity. It felt wrong. It felt like I was diminishing a bright kid's achievements to satisfy parents who seemed more concerned with politics than education. But things got worse in January when I was called to Principal Hendrix's office for what she described as a concerning conversation about my teaching practices. "The Chen family has filed a formal complaint about your treatment of Timothy," she said, showing me a typed document that was several pages long. "They claim you've continued to engage in discriminatory behavior despite their request to stop." "Discriminatory how?" I asked, reading through allegations that seemed to describe a completely different teacher than who I thought I was. According to the complaint, I was creating a hostile learning environment by systematically targeting Timothy Chen with unwanted attention and inappropriate comments about his intellectual abilities. The document claimed that my behavior was discriminatory based on perceived academic performance and was causing Timothy emotional distress and social isolation from peers. "They want me to stop acknowledging that Timothy is academically advanced?" I asked, trying to understand how encouragement had become discrimination. "They want you to treat Timothy exactly like every other student in your class," Hendrix replied. "No special comments, no differentiated feedback, no recognition of academic differences." "But that's not good teaching," I protested. "Students have different needs and abilities. Timothy needs more challenging work than some of his classmates. How can I provide appropriate instruction if I can't acknowledge differences in student performance?" "You'll have to figure out how to meet his needs without making comments about his intelligence," Hendrix said. "The district's legal counsel is taking this complaint very seriously. Despite my best efforts to comply with the Chen family's demands, the situation continued to escalate. In February, I was informed that they had hired a lawyer and were considering filing a federal lawsuit against me and the school district. The allegations were both serious and absurd. According to their legal team, my comments about Timothy's intelligence constituted verbal abuse under federal anti-discrimination laws. They claimed that singling out students for academic ability created a hostile educational environment that violated Timothy's civil rights. But the most shocking part was the evidence they'd been collecting. For months, Timothy had been wearing a small recording device to school, documenting every interaction he had with me. His parents had transcripts of classroom conversations, recordings of private feedback sessions, and detailed logs of every time I'd praised his work or acknowledged his abilities. Mr. Davidson consistently targets Timothy with inappropriate comments about his intellectual abilities, their lawyer wrote in a formal complaint to the district. Statements like "brilliant work," "you're so smart," and "gifted thinking" create a discriminatory environment that violates federal educational equity standards. Reading through the evidence was surreal. Every moment of encouragement, every instance of praise, every time I'd tried to build Timothy's confidence had been documented as potential abuse. Comments I'd made to help him feel good about his achievements were being presented as examples of harmful discrimination. The district's response was swift and devastating. Rather than fight an expensive federal lawsuit, they decided to settle quietly and remove the problem, me. "We're recommending that you resign at the end of the school year," Hendricks told me during a meeting that included the district's lawyer and union representative. "The legal costs of defending this case would be enormous, and frankly, we can't afford the negative publicity." "So you're sacrificing me to avoid a lawsuit over complimenting a student?" I asked, unable to believe what I was hearing. "You're not being sacrificed," the district lawyer replied. "You're being offered an opportunity to resign quietly with a neutral reference. If you force us to fight this case, there's no guarantee how it might end." The message was clear: resign quietly or be fired publicly with a discrimination finding that would follow me for the rest of my career. The final straw came when the Chen family's lawyer contacted local media about their groundbreaking case challenging academic discrimination in public schools. Suddenly, my story was featured in newspapers and television reports as an example of how teachers could abuse students through intellectual favoritism. James Davidson repeatedly singled out our client's son for his perceived academic abilities, creating a hostile learning environment that violated federal anti-discrimination laws, the lawyer told Channel 7 News. No child should be subjected to unwanted attention and labeling based on their intellectual performance. The news coverage was devastating. Video of me walking into school was accompanied by commentary about teachers who abuse students through academic targeting. My photo appeared next to headlines about discrimination in the classroom and when praise becomes abuse. Parents who didn't know the full story began demanding answers. How long had I been discriminating against students? Were their children safe in my classroom? Why hadn't the district caught this pattern of abuse sooner? The irony was crushing. A career spent encouraging students, building confidence, and celebrating achievements was being destroyed because I'd told a bright kid he was smart. But the worst part was watching the impact on my other students. Kids who had thrived under my encouragement began to doubt themselves. Parents started questioning whether my praise for their children was appropriate or discriminatory. The classroom environment that had been built on positivity and support became tense and uncertain. Timothy himself seemed confused by the entire situation. He still raised his hand eagerly during lessons, still asked thoughtful questions, still lit up when we started new topics. But now I couldn't acknowledge his insights without wondering if his parents were documenting my response as evidence of further abuse. The settlement was finalized in May. The district paid the Chen family $200,000 to avoid a federal trial. I resigned my teaching position with a neutral reference that would make finding another job nearly impossible. And Timothy finished 5th grade in a classroom where his teacher was afraid to acknowledge his abilities for fear of legal consequences. Today, 3 years after resigning from Maplewood Elementary, I work as a tutoring coordinator for a private learning center. It's rewarding work. I still get to help students understand difficult concepts and build confidence in their abilities, but it's not the same as having my own classroom. The Chen case became a precedent that school districts across the country now cite when training teachers about appropriate feedback and avoiding academic discrimination. New teachers are warned about the legal risks of excessive praise and intellectual favoritism. Some districts have implemented policies requiring that all student feedback be documented and reviewed to ensure it doesn't create hostile learning environments. The effect on education has been chilling. Teachers are afraid to challenge gifted students for fear of being accused of favoritism. Praise is carefully measured and equally distributed, regardless of actual performance. The idea that telling a student they're smart could be considered abuse has made educators paranoid about any comment that acknowledges academic differences. Timothy Chen went on to middle school, where I hope he found teachers brave enough to nurture his obvious talents despite the legal risks. His parents never publicly acknowledged that their son was intellectually gifted. That would have undermined their argument that recognizing academic ability constitutes discrimination. The case also revealed something troubling about how we think about education and equality. In the pursuit of ensuring that no student feels bad about their academic performance, we've created an environment where no student can feel particularly good about their achievements either. But perhaps the saddest part is what happened to the other students in my class. Kids who had been excited about learning became cautious about showing enthusiasm. Students who had thrived on academic challenges began to hide their abilities to avoid unwanted attention. The classroom culture that celebrated intellectual curiosity and achievement was replaced by one that prioritized emotional safety over academic growth. If you're a teacher reading this, be careful about how you praise your students. Document every interaction. Consider the legal implications of acknowledging that some students are more capable than others. Remember that in today's educational climate, telling a child they're brilliant might be the most dangerous thing you can do. Because sometimes the greatest abuse we can inflict on gifted students is pretending they're not gifted at all. And sometimes the system designed to protect children from harm ends up protecting them from the very encouragement they need to reach their potential. The lawsuit that was supposed to ensure equal treatment for all students instead created an environment where exceptional students can't be acknowledged, talented kids can't be challenged, and teachers can't celebrate the achievements that make education meaningful. In trying to protect Timothy Chen from the harm of being called smart, his parents may have done far more damage to his education than any teacher ever could.